Hey folks, BlackCross here, and I figured today I'd do a quick little review video. This is, like last year, there had been a handful of games that I had played. Either I decided not to make reviews on, or just I didn't care much for the game, or whatever number of reasons that prevent me from actually making it into an actual review. But I figured, you know what, this is the perfect time as any to talk about those games. As I've stated before in the past, these reviews are more opinionated and as recommendations to people who have interest in other games aside from one or two genres. So in other words, if any of these games pick your interest, here are my thoughts on these games. And there are 5 of them, so let's get started. So this game I had beaten earlier this year, like back in January, February, something like that, and it's Pray for the Gods. This is something that I've been looking forward to playing for a long time, ever since I first found out that it was being made. A supposed Shadow of the Colossus successor, clone, whatever way you want to word it, is literally Shadow of the Colossus. Now, on the one hand, that's always going to be a good thing for me, because I love Shadow of the Colossus, so therefore having another Shadow of the Colossus-like game would definitely be a great thing to have. Pray for the Gods? I'm a bit mixed, admittedly. Now, of course, with that being said, it could be because of the fact that it is a little bit buggy, and there are some cases in which where the game does kind of have its technical issues, but for the most part, while all of that is the case, this game is not as great as the original Shadow of the Colossus. I know I shouldn't rival it close to Shadow of the Colossus, but really, in all honesty, because of how great Shadow of the Colossus was, I'm going to be looking at this based on that merit. With that being said, there are 2 areas that I want to touch on real quickly. The first part is the exploration part. You're basically in this frozen tundra with several enemies that could attack you at any point in time, and your occasional random run-into with these colossi that you might find out in the wild. The area itself is actually pretty good, in all honesty. You can hunt animals in order to have the meat either cook or raw, and it will restore your HP. You can also look for random areas that has a puzzle attached to it, and if you solve that puzzle, you will get an artifact. Grab 3 artifacts, and you can either increase your HP or stamina. Something similar of that of like Breath of the Wild or something like that, to which I actually kind of like it. The exploration is really good. The Colossi, on the other hand though, are not that well impressed, I'm afraid. Fighting the Colossi was good, but not as great as like actually fighting the actual Colossi. When you get on the Colossus, it is actually really good, but as trying to get on the Colossi is a different challenge altogether. There are some ways that you can get around in order to get on it, and it requires a little bit of exploration, except for the grapple hook. The grapple hook is probably the worst mechanic in this game. There's no clear indication as to what can be grabbable, what is not grabbable, so on and so forth. So it's one of those things where I'm just constantly like thinking to myself, can I grab on this surface? Can I grab on that surface? Can I even latch on to the Colossi itself? Most answer is no. There are actually 2 Colossi in particular in which where I was confused as to where I was supposed to latch onto with the grapple hook, much less how do I go about fighting the Colossi. And it's not even from me not knowing how to get on the Colossi, it's not knowing if the grapple hook will even work on any surface, to which it doesn't work on all surface, I'm afraid. Bottom line is that if you can get familiar with the game and you get used to the idea of how it all works, it can be good, but for the most part it's a little bit buggy in some areas, and even with the grapple hook it can sometimes be a little bit of a janky mess in terms of camera angles. But I will say that I did enjoy myself playing this game whenever I did enjoy it, and other times that I didn't enjoy it, it stuck with me pretty badly. For that reason, I'm going to give Pray for the Gods a 3 out of 5. But hey, if you want a Shadow of the Colossus clone, this is going to be the closest one you're ever going to get. Especially since, well, chances are we might not ever see another one in the next 10 years probably, depending. I don't know. Malalis Fallen? I hope I pronounced that right. I probably butchered that first part badly. but I've had this downloaded for a long time now, and I've been interested in wanting to play it and trying out for myself. Getting into it though, whew, it was rough. It was rough. It's not like your normal gameplay. You're basically playing as like a vessel. This random character, either male or female, depending on how you want to play. But you start off as a vessel, and your goal is to take out these dark deities, or dark beings, or dark lords, however way you want to describe them, and fight them, defeat them to where you can finally face off against the Malice, which is this giant demon-looking boss. Now, the reason why I'm explaining this story segment is because it is actually separated into 3 and 4 separate chapters. 3 or 4 different chapters that are short, but at the same time not really short at all. The first part of the game you're going to be playing through, you're going to be fighting against 4 random bosses, and if you beat them, you'll fight against the Malice. After you defeat that, you'll then enter in another chapter where you will also have to fight off against a number of bosses as well to fight against the Malice. And then, by the time you get done beating that one, you'll have what's called an endless mode, or the final chapter in which where you fight off against this little... It's kind of hard to explain it. The story's kind of little all over the place, and I lost track of what I was doing half the time, because really, there's no voice acting, but the gameplay is actually the main focus. Gameplay is tricky, admittedly. The gameplay is actually the hardest part of figuring out how this game works. It's, in a weird sense, it's like Dark Souls, where the gameplay is so different, and until you get used to the gameplay, you're not going to get used to the game at all. Essentially, you can fight off against the enemies, but they're mostly to help you build up your overall point meter and all that stuff to where you can use different sets of abilities, and then your main focus is tackling on the boss itself. The main focus is fighting the boss. In a weird sense, it's kind of like Dynasty Warrior, except the main focus is fighting the boss itself, and not the enemies. But, I don't know. It's a weird mix of gameplay, and while I did enjoy the main process of the game, the endless mode is where I absolutely did not want to be a part of it any more than I have been. It was very torturous on my end, sadly. But let's put it this way, if you like being able to fight giant bosses, this is about as good of a game as you're gonna get. It's got unique gameplay, complexity depending on how you look at it. So, if you're able to muscle through and get used to the gameplay and figure out how it all works, then congratulations, you're going to enjoy this game. If you can't figure out the gameplay, then chances are you're not going to enjoy it either. So, just be forewarned, it's not an easy game to learn in terms of how the mechanics works. But if you can get used to the mechanics and actually get good at the game, chances are you're going to enjoy it to a certain degree. For this rating, I'll give the game at least a 3 out of 5. I want to give it lower, but if I give it lower, that means there's a bigger problem. And really, there's not really that big of a problem. It's more of a learning curve than anything. A very, very deep learning curve. Okay, I'm going to have guns literally aimed to my face at this point. And the next game I'm going to be talking about is Dead Cells. I cannot give this game a rating because I lost interest in Dead Cells. Like, it's so weird. It's literally a roguelike game, so alongside like Hades and stuff like that. So you would think a game like this would be interesting. And for the longest time, I had been interested in wanting to play through Dead Cells. The sad thing is, I kinda got bored a number of times. It's not like Hades, where the gameplay is fun and addicting and it makes you want to stick with it for the long haul. Dead Cells, after 1 or 2 rounds, you're about good for the day. So, it's hard for me to recommend this to anyone. It's not like Hades, where the gameplay is so addicting and fun and entertaining, despite the fact that it's hard and challenging. If you're going to make a roguelike game, you need to have the focus of entertainment and fun, and not just be challenging. Because unless the player loves being tortured to death, it's not going to be fun and entertaining for the player. And I know that's kind of hard to say, especially considering the fact that there's a Souls series, but I digress. This is a roguelike game, where the process of the game is constantly going through a gauntlet fighting hordes of enemies and bosses in order to reach the end. But in that same process, you're going to be dying a lot. And I do mean a lot. In all honesty, it's hard to say if it's worth going back and trying it again. But for that reason, I'm not going to give it a rating. But if I did, I'd probably give it like somewhere around a 3 out of 5 if I was to give it a rating. But again, later on, sometime next year, I may give it a second try and see maybe if I can like make better progression out of it. I don't want to just let go of Dead Cells and just say it's not as good as what I was hoping it was going to be, as I'm sure there's a good game in it. It's just going to require a little bit more patience and a little bit more focus compared to how Hades was. Hades was just fun and entertaining throughout the entire time. Dead Cells it feels dead to me, sadly, I'm afraid. We have a short little game called Unpacking. And when I say it's a short game, I mean it. It's a very short game. Unpacking is literally a puzzle game in which where you're basically unloading all of the items that's inside the shipping boxes that you have, and you're basically setting them across the entire room or the entire house, depending on how the layout is. There's a couple of chapters in the game, but really, in all honesty, the puzzles are fun and entertaining, and really is very relaxing. So relaxing, in fact, that I've practically wasted hours on end just playing the game and just enjoying myself, you know? The thrill of unpacking and just having the items set for display and stuff like that. I mean, heck, you look at my game room and you can clearly see that I have an organization habit or addiction, however way you want to look at it. But this game is pretty good. This game is really interesting and I really did enjoy myself. My only complaint is, of course, that it is short, and there are a few little button prompts that could use a little bit better performance, or either remapping, depending on how you want to word it. But overall, Unpacking is really good, and I recommend it to anyone who actually loves a good puzzle game. So Unpacking, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. One True Hero. I have a small story to tell you here. So, One True Hero. I recently played this last month, and after playing about an hour, I decided I didn't want to have anything to do with this game, sadly. And that is sad, because whenever I looked at the game, I thought it looked interesting, it looked fun, and I thought to myself, this could be good, this could be entertaining. I got into it, and I immediately regret spending the first hour that I've ever spent. The gameplay is a little bit janky as to be perspective from the graphics, and yes, the quality isn't as good, but I was willing to give it a hard pass because I was interested into the gameplay. And when I finally got into the gameplay, it was kind of bland, I'm afraid. It wasn't as good or as in-depth as I was hoping it would be. It's a little bit slow in some ways. And then you have the story. The story... How can I explain this? The story is basically a giant joke. If you're familiar with this type of storytelling in which where basically the game tells you blah blah blah, yap yap yap, yeah I know you're the hero and all that stuff, go do this and that, and just leave me alone. That type of storytelling, you know? And I get the joke ideal, I do get it, but unfortunately I kind of fell off of the story immediately as soon as I heard these people talking, or even for that matter when the narrator started. I honestly felt like as if this game wasn't even trying to be a game. It was just trying to develop a random story, random gameplay. It was trying to throw itself onto the online stores in order to meet sales, and unfortunately it fell short. So short, in fact, that it fell face first into the ground and never got up since. It's hard for me to recommend this game. In fact, really in all honesty, you can tell by looking at it right away. If this game doesn't look good, it's probably because it's not good. And again, I'll say it again, it's hard for me to recommend this to anyone unless you're looking for a random game that you just want to play and give it a try for yourself. Could it be good? Small audience maybe, but I'm sorry, I can't recommend this one. So I'm not going to give it a rating, but I'm going to give it a cautionary warning, basically saying, look at the game and you say to yourself, does this look like it's going to be good? If the answer is no, then it's probably going to be a hard pass for you. If it looks good, give it a try, but just be prepared for the possible lackluster feeling you're going to feel when you play it. Anyway, those are games that I have played throughout 2022 that I didn't want to do a review or didn't feel like I needed to have a review on itself, so I decided to compile them all into a small video, giving you my overall thoughts and opinions. So thank you so much, guys, and I'll see you in 2023 with more videos, more reviews, and who knows what other mishaps I'll come up with next. So thank you so much. See you next time.